The scapegoating of Isaiah Thomas in 2017-18, key points. 1. The losing of the Cavs began 3 games before Isaiah Thomas returned from injury. They were 0 from 3 when he returned. 2. This losing continued in 2 additional games that Isaiah Thomas missed as he was not cleared for back-to-back games, so they were 0 from 5 without him during that stretch. 3. The media continually reported the full patch of games including games Thomas didn't participate in at all in their indictments of him, including the tally of 7 and 13 when he was traded. They were 7 and 8 with him. 4. It was said in the aftermath that Isaiah Thomas could not play with LeBron James, not the other way around, despite 2 deliberate turnovers by James in impossible-to-catch passes to Isaiah in a Magic game that they ultimately lost, and the plays remarkably escaped any media scrutiny that I saw. It was probably a blame Isaiah game, but then they all were. It was looking increasingly like James was trying to sabotage Isaiah. Despite this fact, there were signs that when James decided to pass catchable passes to Isaiah they were winning. When James had 8 or more assists, they were 5 wins and 1 loss with Isaiah. 5. The method used to determine him as the worst defensive player in the NBA is the DRTG rating. The DRTG rating is an estimate based not on individual contribution, but the contribution of the 5 players on court at the time he was on court. Same with plus/minus. Both statistics are extremely unreliable over a small patch of games. Using an almost random, at that stage, collective measure during a slump by the team as a whole to single out and blame a single player is scapegoating. The measure also put his teammates on an almost equally bad footing that the media seems to have missed, including Derrick Rose, who was just below him, and LeBron James. As an example of how widely variable and ultimately unreliable the statistic is from team to team and season to season, Isaiah ranked 126 of around 500 players in 2015-16. 6. During this period, both LeBron James and Kevin Love had slumps, including a 10-point game by James, but the media singled out Isaiah Thomas for the blame. The coach also blamed him for stealing Love's shots. Love played in an extremely similar manner all throughout the first round of the playoffs without Isaiah Thomas, indicating it was possibly Love who simply lacked drive during that period. 7. After pulling out of a game in which they were trounced just a few minutes in due to a mysterious illness, the media singled out Isaiah Thomas as leading a locker room revolt against Kevin Love. This story was firstly sensationalized beyond absurdity, using a slightly earlier Rockets-Clippers locker room confrontation as the template, and later was revealed that it was Dwayne Wade who was the leader of the revolt, not Isaiah Thomas anyway. Additionally, it was said that Love had a chance to pacify his teammates, giving them an explanation, but didn't. Despite this correction of the facts, people still call him a locker room cancer, whereas someone like Dwayne Wade isn't. 8. At the time of the trade, both he and Dwayne Wade had the best defended field goal percentages on the team. This is despite certain media singling out his lack of height as being responsible. It was more often the pattern than not that it was not Isaiah Thomas's assignments who were doing the scoring, despite what that idiot Colin Cowherd said, but the scoring was coming from other positions and he was still blamed for it, in particular to his lack of height. His DFG percent actually ranked for much of the season towards the top of the league at a low 40%. He may have tried harder than others to compensate. 9. In his first game for LA, the team was blown out in a bad defensive performance. Some media blamed Isaiah, even though Isaiah had the best DRTG rating on the team in that game, claims by an analysis who doubted it, thinking Isaiah must be responsible until he looked it up. 10. In his second game in LA, he was repeatedly deliberately hit and elbowed in the face by Rajon Rondo and got disqualified because of Rajon Rondo's antics, over a video tribute dispute no less. 11. In this game, he played for 5 minutes but was blamed for another blowout defensively by sections of the media. In that 5-minute stretch, the scoring rate was lower than it had been that quarter. 12. In a later game, Colin Cowherd concocted a false story saying Isaiah Thomas, who was cold, single-handedly blew a Lakers lead against Portland in the last 5 minutes in his attempts at one-upmanship against Damian Lillard, who was on fire. According to Cowherd, Isaiah had to get his and hence took loads of shots even though he was cold, causing them to lose their lead. This was utterly false. Although it was true Isaiah took way too many shots that night and had a shocking shooting percentage, in the final 5 minutes of the game he took only 3 shots, one of which was forced as it was passed to him as the designated shooter couldn't get free for a last-second shot. Another shot was wide open in the lane, the kind of shot you'd be yelled out for not taking. So in totality, his one-upmanship during the stretch consisted of just 1 shot. And Cowherd knew this. He knew the exact margin by both teams' scores with 5 minutes remaining and had compiled a highlights reel consisting of 3 shots, but chose to lie to people. He also presented some highly questionable selective stats to back up his claim that Thomas was an average player at best. 13. After the All-Star break, he had a 107.7 DRTG rating, which seems to put him roughly around the middle of the league defensively, suggesting in conjunction with the fact that his previous teams who didn't collapse when he played with them that Cleveland was an oddity. His rating was despite the fact that his steal count was pathetic even by his standards, suggesting a large reason for it was his DFG percent. Cleveland has since gone on to have bad streaks after his departure. 14. Did the media point out that his DRTG rating, the rating they had used to repeatedly crucify him, had dramatically improved in LA? Not a word. Just as they wouldn't dare breathe a word about his DFG percent. Why didn't a team like LA, who didn't have a LeBron James caliber player, collapse in the same way the Cavs did? Even though his win-loss was the same for both teams, the margins of defeat were significantly wider at Cleveland. 15. Instead they focused on his shooting numbers of about 37-32-90 as signs he had barely improved, only at the time he had. Despite what the numbers suggested, his true shooting percentage had increased, if memory serves, from about 49% at Cleveland to 56% in LA, one of the better marks on the Lakers team by season averages and even as good as some Jordan championship seasons. True shooting percentage is basically how efficient a player is in scoring, and things which skew that are the number of three-point makes and free throws, the latter of which Isaiah was getting a ton of and had at the time of reporting hit about 50 straight. 16. A game or two later, Isaiah was now at a 59% true shooting percent, 42-37-90 if I recall, almost overtaking team leader Julius Randle and just 3% from where he was in 2016-17, which was one of the most efficient scoring seasons from a volume scorer in history. According to the wisdom of the journalists, he was still no better than he was in Cleveland. 17. At that point, it looked like there was hope Isaiah Thomas would eventually return to form and was on the up and up. However, he had a string of bad games to close his season in which his true shooting percent nosedived to 52%. He then pulled out to get surgery on his hip, indicating he may have been playing with a re-aggravated hip during that downwards trend. 18. As if the media couldn't get enough, even though he was no longer playing for them, he was still scapegoated as Cleveland entered the playoffs. Before the first round, the media took the 4 regular season games against the Pacers, for which the Cavs were 1 win and 3 losses, as indictment against Isaiah Thomas, because all 4 games occurred before the trade. In actuality, even though all 4 games occurred before the trade, only one of those 4 games Isaiah played in, and that was the one game they won. 19. After the second round sweep, the media attacked Isaiah Thomas during the mid-season slump, saying the team had been fixed by the mid-season trades, ignoring completely the fact that the traded players were severely underperforming and they barely survived the Pacers series, and only after a bad referee decision that should have awarded the Pacers a goaltend in one of the games. By plus-minus, the Cavs were thoroughly outplayed that series, winning by an average of 3 points and losing by an average of 18. And the mid-season replacement players done no better in the second round. 20. Now that both the Celtics and Cavs have made it to the conference finals despite almost losing in the first round, many have gone on to accuse Isaiah Thomas and Kyrie Irving as adding nothing to the Celtics franchise, suggesting the Celtics would have gotten there in 2016-17 without Isaiah Thomas anyway. While it is true the 2017-18 Celtics have played well without Kyrie, around 60%, during the 2016-17 season the Celtics won 2 from 6 regular season games without Isaiah Thomas and blew their chance to prove how good they were without Isaiah and how much of a net minus he was when he was injured in the conference finals. I remember the accusations the Celtics were better without Thomas during that series until things went awry, so he didn't even need the disappointment of 2017-18 to be held accountable as the scapegoat, the singular player who was ultimately holding the team back from greatness. 21. Many now say that the Celtics were hindered by the ball hog Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas's true shooting percentage for the 2016-17 was one of the most efficient on record for a high-volume scorer. He was exactly the player you would want to score 30 a night. As opposed to Kobe Bryant, who never was that efficient. No one who knows anything about basketball statistics would ever make the claim that that was his flaw in 2016-17. For the record, even at his worst in Cleveland he was still posting better true shooting numbers than end-of-career Kobe Bryant. In conjunction, As low as his percentages were, he was also holding his opponent to inefficient shooting. It is quite possible on the average he was more efficient in 2017-18 than his assignment despite only shooting high 30% from the field. No matter what, Isaiah will always be blamed. This is what you get for sticking your health and your career out for others. Ruination. He never asked to be traded in the first place, and was met with boos, assassination by the media, including frequent ridicule for his height, and booting off of the team after only 15 games, only to wind up being used by LA in an attempt to free up contract space so they can kick him out the next season and sign up someone else. Isaiah has his bad points. His ego, including his ridiculous interviews, is one. But in terms of the bad guys here, it is the shithead journalists and intolerable basketball fans who take the prize.